to gender studies. Our topic today is gender contributions in Africa. We're going to look at patriarchy, Islam, and the veil. Remember that one of the major assumptions in gender studies is that society is patriarchal. So you cannot study gender studies without examining the concept of patriarchy. Patriarchy implies that in gender relations, men are empowered over women. Patriarchy itself is the role of the father at the level of the family. Invariably, patriarchy then implies the level of society that men are empowered over women. This is how gender has been construed over time. That in human relations, especially at the level of the genders, men have more power compared to women. So patriarchy is a system which assigns more power to men over women. Any given. And gender studies is a discipline that studies these power relations between men and women. Although in our time, the traditional notion of gender has been markedly altered because we do not have two genders anymore. So when I'm speaking about gender relations, I am mostly speaking in terms of the traditional notion of gender. But gender right now is not only about men and women. People are now free to identify with gender categories other than male or female. So you need to know that. And that is why I insist that it's important for us to have queer studies in the course of mine. Now, gender studies, or if you call it feminism, came with modernism and its precursors. In the 19th century. So feminism is normally a Western concept, or normally perceived as a Western concept. Through scholarship, through education, it has been domesticated in Africa by most of our scholars interested in the subject. And so today we know that gender, as it is conceptualized in Africa, is different from how it is conceptualized in the West, or there are some areas of differences. It came to a point when it was believed that we cannot take everything that is believed in Western feminism when you are talking about gender relations in Africa, gender studies in Africa. Because gender studies in Africa has to acknowledge African values, or what are deemed to be African values. But in the end, what unites Western feminism and African feminism is the struggle or fight against patriarchy. But how this fight or struggle is done is what Western feminists and African feminists differ, or in the area where they differ or disagree. The approaches will not be the same, but there is a common enemy, which is patriarchy. Remember, I said patriarchy and not men. It is faulty feminism to construe that feminism is a struggle against men or a fight against men in society, or it's a war that women have to fight against men. It's a faulty feminism, and it breeds bad blood among the genders. A better approach is to see feminism as a struggle against a system that empowers men to dominate against women. Because apart from that, you have matriarchy, which is also a system that empowers women to dominate men in society where matriarchy is practiced. And so then you will not say that Gender studies would be a struggle by men to suppress women or to be equal with women, because that is what Western feminism advocates: equality with men. Fighting for the rights of women, which are seen to be held by men. So if you refuse to understand that it is a struggle against a system, you always see men as the enemy, whereas they are not. Because if we change the system to matriarchy, then women will have the leading role. So perhaps the first thing to note in gender studies is that men are not the problem, but the system that empowers men to dominate women is the problem. And that is how you, even at your individual level of relations, will live a better life. Not going about life with the notion that you have to fight every man you see because it's the enemy, the system. So you have to see life in terms of system. That's what structuralism teaches you. So according to Bob Pierrick, B-O-B, P-I-E-R-I-K, according to Bob Pierrick, 2022, there are two major theories of patriarchy. There are two major theories of patriarchy. There is patriarchy as a hierarchical authority in the family. There is patriarchy as a hierarchical authority in the family. That is, in that hierarchical authority, the male, the father, is at the apex. Father, mother, children. Father, mother, and children. So there's no equality there. The father comes first. He's the leader of the family, the head of the family. That's patriarchy. And then there is patriarchy as a ubiquitous or universal structure through which men dominate women. And there is patriarchy as what? As a ubiquitous or universal structure through which men dominate women. There's patriarchy as a ubiquitous or universal structure through which men dominate women. Ubiquitous, seeming to be everywhere. Use the term when you are studying are fertiles. When they say fertiles are ubiquitous, what does it mean? It means fertiles seem to be everywhere. They're universal, that's why you don't say ubiquitous, say universal. Patriarchy as a ubiquitous or universal structure through which men dominate. So there are two major categories or theories of patriarchy, but the two are relevant to any discussion of gender and gender relations, because the empowerment of men over women begins at the level of the family. And then from there, it projects into the larger society. Place of work, politics, economic system, and so on and so forth. In the army, so you must understand that the study of patriarchy has come a long way, and its understanding too. In fact, the reality surrounding patriarchy has shifted. The reality surrounding patriarchy has shifted in our time because those societies deemed to be patriarchal, the shift, the marked shift in gender relations meant that women have gone on to achieve some of their, or most of their gender goals, or if you like, feminist goals. When feminism began in the 19th century, women were even looking for the right to vote, the right to even go to school, because even education was given to the male. There was a certain type of education that was given to the women, which was meant to make them live in the house. Education was tailored to make them good housewives. Now to sing and dance for the family, for the man. Now to prepare food, take care of the children, bear children. They were not allowed to be in the army. So even education itself was tailored to disempower women. Women were not allowed to work or do certain jobs. They were not allowed to have public relevance, either in politics or in the economy. So it was a huge fight to get women to vote, own properties, and so on and so forth. But today, a whole lot has been achieved in that area. Women can be educated alongside the men in all professions, including the army. Aviation. In fact, when gender studies started, there were certain jobs that women were not allowed to do by law or even by societal perception. For a long time, it was believed that women couldn't be engineers, couldn't be doctors, but nurses. So when you look back and then you consider it with the present, then you see that a lot has been achieved. But the conversations have to be kept going because issues keep emerging in gender relations. And so in gender studies, there's a difference between uh, sex and gender. There's a difference between sex and gender. Who can tell us the difference between sex and gender? Sex is biological. Gender is a social construct. That's the difference. Sex is biological. Sex is a biological concept. Gender is a social construct. So gender perceptions are imposed by society. And it is that which limits the woman, not the sex. Most of the things we believe about women in society are socially constructed or socially conceived. Socially constructed, socially conceived. They are the sum of all that has been theorized over time about women, beginning in the classical period with scholars like Aristotle, who saw women as inferior men, weaker vessels. So women might not actually be this weak, but societal perception could impose limitations on individuals. Otherwise, why do you have women in the army now? Women in aviation? Because women also came up and said, whatever men can do, we can also do it. So it's perception as well. That, oh, you couldn't be in the army, you couldn't be a doctor, you couldn't be an engineer, just because of your gender. So that's what we need to understand. The difference between sex and gender. So patriarchy permeates every aspect of society. Patriarchy permeates every aspect of society. It's ingrained, it's built into our religious beliefs, our traditions. That is why it is systemic. And that's why I keep saying you have to view it as a system rather than viewing it as a war against men. So it is men who are not enlightened on the nature of patriarchy that oppress women. But enlightened men will not oppress women. So that's why gender relations should be a tool for the enlightenment of the two genders, or the genders, because we will not have two anymore. Rather than a war, rather than a warfare in the genders. So in Christianity, for instance, Christianity is patriarchal. As it's patriarchal, the Bible is seen by feminists as a patriarchal text because it empowers men over women. In the church, in marriage, the woman is taught that the man is the head of the family, and the woman accepts that the man is the head of the family. The one who takes decisions, who leads the family. And most times that women are told that if they do not accept men as the head of the family, they should not marry. So wherever you go, you see patriarchy. And most women have accepted patriarchy because it's a system, and have even forced other women to accept it. Okay, so your mom will tell you when you go to your husband's house, obey your husband, don't insult your husband, do whatever he tells you to do. That's patriarchy. Okay? She's a woman who has accepted patriarchy. I'll tell you that is how it is done. Okay, so if the man beats you and you run back to the house, they say, go back. So you go back, just a little beating, and you're coming back. Like you're coming back to do in this house. Okay? So, even the concept of God has been conceived as male until some feminists came along the way and said that God is gender neutral, or God is both gender in one, two genders in one. So the conception of God as male is a patriarchal ideology to keep men at the hem of affairs, the family, and the world. Because God who rules the whole world is male, and the person who should rule the family should be male. The person who should be president should be male. You get it? In Islam, we have the concept of the veil, which is also patriarchal in nature. And it is women who wear the veil in Islam. The veil is a scarf that assigns religious and social identities on the Muslim woman. It is, first of all, worn as a religious practice of modesty. But when you bring it to the realm of gender studies, it has myriads of connotations. The veil is worn to cover the face. There's the concept of veiling in Christianity, but it is during wedding. To mean that the man has never seen the woman before. And that is the first time that the man has seen the woman. Perhaps both literally and figuratively. Both literally and metaphorically. So when the veil is removed at church, that is the first time the man has seen the woman. Meaning that the whole process of marriage could have been divinely directed. The veil in Christianity is a symbol of purity and chastity. To show that the woman has been untouched, holy, and pure. In Islam, the concept of veiling is more because the woman wears the veil all the time, especially in public. There are different ways of wearing the veil. There is the absolute veiling. That one, I don't know how they see when they move on the road. Because that veiling covers everywhere. I hope there's a space around the eyes that they could see road. Okay? So sometimes if you are not suspecting, you might think that it's a masquerade that you're seeing. In your environment. I suppose it is deemed that it is only the man that's supposed to see the woman's face. And that is in the house. So no other man is allowed to see the woman's face, even in public. That's why those Muslim women move around completely veiled. There's a type of veiling that is partial, covers the head and the neck, but reveals the face. Now, veiling is a religious duty that signifies modesty for the Muslim woman. But it could be understood as a patriarchal maneuver or a patriarchal tactic of denying the Muslim woman identity. It also be seen as a patriarchal tactic of denying the Muslim woman identity, or making her to be unseen. Because one of the patriarchal notions that feminists fight against is the invisibility of a woman. The invisibility of a woman. When an individual occupies the category of otherness, an individual occupies the category of otherness, one of the marks of otherness is invisibility. Remember that one of the marks of otherness is what? Invisibility. Not being seen. Not being seen. Otherness. And marked by invisibility at any binary discourse. But our binary discourse at this moment is gender, male-female relation. Invisibility can exist at the level of race relation, black and white, where the black is seen to be invisible. So the concept of veiling appears to make the Muslim woman to be what? Invisible. Denies her identity. She's not even to be seen, not to talk of being heard. Because in some constructs, we are told that the woman is to be seen and not to be heard. That means one of the marks of women in patriarchy is voicelessness. Okay? That's why the woman is always accused of talking too much. Okay? So, but veiling also hides the woman's identity. And so you can use that to interrogate other forms of invisibility and loss of identity for the Muslim woman in gender discourse. And it is all rooted in patriarchy, that is in Islam, because patriarchy is also, Islam is also a patriarchal religion, just like Christianity. Empowers men over women. That's a system that empowers men over women, where the man is free to marry as many wives as possible, as long as he can marry. So note that. One of the recent discussion on veiling is by Wolfgang Wegner et al. Wolfgang Wegner et al. In that 2012 study, Wolfgang Wegner et al. in the study published in 2012 entitled The Veil and Muslim Women's Identity, Cultural Pressures and Resistance to Stereotyping. The Veil and Muslim Women's Identity, Cultural Pressures and Resistance to Stereotyping. So you need to know that in patriarchy, women are subject to stereotyping. That is being assigned fixed identities simply because of their gender. Being assigned fixed identities simply because of their gender stereotype. So simply because it's a woman, one cannot do this. Simply because it's a woman, this is how the person should be viewed. That's stereotyping. Stereotype. The veil and the Muslim women's identity, cultural pressures, and resistance to stereotyping. In this study, the authors maintain that veiling is a means of identity for the Muslim woman. But that veiling is perceived in different ways depending on the space that the woman occupies at the particular moment. That is, whether the woman is in a predominantly Muslim environment or in an environment where Muslim women are a minority. Like if they move away from a predominantly Muslim environment, the view of veiling will change. Remember, in the wake of terrorist attacks linked to extremist countries in the Muslim world, in the wake of terrorist attacks in the early 2000s in the Western world, often linked to extremists, fundamentalists in the Western world or in the Muslim world, the Muslim identity came under suspicion and attack in Western countries. I understand that complete veiling has been banned in France. So anything, in fact, after the terrorist attack in the US, when the World Trade Center was bombed, it was on sale to be a Muslim in any part of the West. They were held under suspicion. So, veiling could be manipulated by terrorists. When someone can wear bombs, cover his face or her face, and hide the bomb, and then the person is not known, the bomb explodes, and then people die. So this explains why veiling came under attack in the Western world, different parts of the Western world, Western countries. And so how veiling is viewed in the West by Muslim women is not how veiling is viewed in the East, where where Islam has majority of worshippers. Say, the Arab countries, and so on and so forth. But traditionally, in gender studies, we want to interpret veiling as that which makes for the loss of identity for the woman. So traditionally, conventionally, we want to view veiling as patriarchal and oppressive for the woman because it hides her identity, makes her invisible. But you see, there is no fixed way of understanding anything in literature. There are usually variations in views, no matter what. So, being a source of identity for the Muslim woman in the West, the Muslim woman in the West who veils wants to appropriate that for her, not only religious, but cultural identity. Because she wants to identify as a Muslim. And how is she going to identify as a Muslim if she does not veil? In a predominantly Western culture, the veil then becomes a positive means of self-identification, either for cultural purposes or for religious purposes. Of course, religion and culture are usually linked, because culture is the totality of what defines us. So when you want to talk about the notion of value, you have to take it from its notion and then push it to where now even the Muslim woman in America or in France will protest and say, why do you say I should not veil? I am not a terrorist. Not all of us are terrorists. I'm wearing my veil to show my identity. Okay? But according to these scholars, in a predominantly Western Muslim societies, veiling will be seen as perhaps a religious duty and negatively perhaps as that which oppresses the woman. So you have to note this difference in views and opinion considering the veil. So we've looked at patriarchy. We've looked at how patriarchy is implicated in religious practices, cultural practices, both in Christianity and in Islam. Perhaps two major world religions. So what we want to do now is to move on and examine a house divided by Charles Nolan. A house divided by Charles Nolan. This essay will help us discuss issues in Maramaba so long and later, and Ndubisi Monaves Dear Ramatulai. So do you have a copy of this essay? Okay, so it will be sent across. But note that it was published in 2010 by Charles Nunn. And the full title of the essay is A House Divided, Feminism in African Literature. A House Divided, Feminism in African Literature. Published in 2010 by Charles Nolan. It is one of the essays found in the book Issues in African Literature. Issues in African Literature is one of the essays of Nolan found in the book entitled Issues in African Literature. In sum, Nolan is criticizing African feminism and its configurations in this essay. Yes, in the essay, Nolan is critical of African feminism. It's subjecting African feminism to scrutiny. He begins the essay by taking stock of the history of feminism, beginning from its origins in the West. Citing texts like A Vindication of the Rights of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft, published in 1792. So gender struggles go back to the 18th century, or the late 18th century, all through the 19th century, and culminated in the modern period in the 20th century. Nolan says that the major slogan of the feminists have always been to attack the tyranny of men, which made me say that it's a faulty assumption in gender studies to assume that it is men that are tyrannous. If you miss the system of things, then you cannot solve any problem. You have to look at the system that makes certain things happen the way they do, instead of the individual specific occurrences. So as an ideologue, you must see things in terms of system and not symptoms. Things must be seen in their systems and not in their symptoms. Nolan reports to us that women in England won the right to vote in 1928. Nolan reports to us that women in England won the right to vote in 1928. Remember, I said that perhaps feminism began with the suffragette movement, the need to get women to involve in politics or to participate in politics by voting. So in traditional gender studies, or notion of gender studies, we are examining gender relations, and by gender relations, we are referring to the relationship between man and woman. But I am saying that these are shifted because there is a third gender category now, which is one other than man or woman, or male or female. So that should also be taken into consideration when you're talking about gender studies, and that is why I insist that we need to have queer studies on the outline. Because it cannot be that while others in other places are studying queer studies, you are left behind, and when you ask questions, you don't have an idea what you're talking about. So in academics, we do not run away from issues. We confront all issues, but in a polite, respectful manner, with decorum. And the conversations have to be kept going. Because without conversations, we don't make progress. And at the end of the late day, superior debates win. But you don't run away from issues. Let the superior argument win. Now let me report that at the Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York, 1848, Malam reports that I'm taking every detail in the essay, so you don't really have to read it again, except you want. At the Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York, in 1848, as reported by Nolly, the key speakers, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Stanton, urged that the American Constitution should be revised to read, "We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women are created equal." Because what is there is that all men are created equal, and they want to use men to refer to humanity. But you see, this is one of the issues, sexist language, one of the things that feminists fight against. Sexist language is language that excludes one gender, as if that gender is not in existence. So to say all men are created equal excludes the woman, making it a man's world. Okay, so part of the fight in against patriarchy is to revisit the language that we use. For daily communication, because language also expresses ideology, belief. So when you say all men are created equal, it marks invisibility or non-existence of the woman. So that is why they insist that the U.S. Constitution should be revised. Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Stanton insist that the U.S. Constitution should be amended to include, because to include the woman in language is to acknowledge her existence in society. And to exclude her in language is to dismiss our existence in society. All men and women are created equal. Of course, that is at the heart of feminism, especially in the West. Equality between the sexes. That is the hallmark of feminism as it is constructed in the West. That the two genders, male and female, have to be what? Equal. Against the notion of patriarchy that men are the head. All right? So I'll take that again. At the Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York, held in 1848, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Stanton urged that the American Constitution should be revised to read, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." All men and women are created what? Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Stanton. So since then, it has always been the rallying cry from the feminists have always been equality amongst the sexes. Whatever you do for the man, do it for the woman. The man has right to inherit property, let the woman also have the right to inherit properties, and so on and so forth. And then Nalam moves on to talk about gender studies as it has been configured in Africa. Nalam says that feminism as a movement has not progressed much from its original modernist tendencies. That's why I said when we started the class that the goal, the objective of all feminists are the same. A fight against patriarchy, the need for equality, the need for women to have their rights in society. So that's what Nalim is saying. Right from its modernist origins, feminism has maintained its what? Its tendencies. And feminism is rooted in the denunciation of patriarchy in all its forms and extremities. Gender studies or feminism, let's say feminism, fights against what? Patriarchy, not men. So it is bad feminism to think that the object of the fight is men. It is bad feminism. It makes you go through life hating men all your life for nothing. Okay? Or competing with men all your life for nothing. Or suspecting men all your life. Doesn't make sense. It will affect your relationship. Okay? Rather, we look at the system that makes female oppression possible, which is patriarchy, the role of the father. So feminism as a movement, an ideology, urges in simple terms recognition of the claims of women for equal rights with men. And these rights cut across legal, political, economic, social, marital, and so on and so forth. I'll take that again. Feminism as a movement and ideology urges, in simple terms, the recognition of the claims of women for equal rights. That's what women are looking for in feminism, equal rights with men. And these rights cut across legal, political, economic, social, marital, and so on and so forth. That is the basic aim or goal of feminism. Then Nolan goes on, please pay attention, because I'll ask you, or maybe not me, the gods will ask you. All right? When the gods ask you, I don't have any hand in it. They have to answer the question. So Nolan goes on to criticize Western feminism as being too individualistic. As being too what? Individualistic. Compared to the African communal essence. That is where we begin to note points of departure or points of divergences between Western feminism and African feminism. As far as Nolim is concerned, Western feminism is too individualistic and it conflicts with African ideology of communalism, collective existence, collective ownership, collective survival. It appears to him that Western feminism pursues individual goals and objective desires, wants, to the detriment of the collective goal or societal goal. Because in African ideology, we survive together and we perish together. Because society exists as a community whereby all our lives are linked so that if something happens to this other person, it affects everyone. So please note this. In criticism, we are always following the point of argument. That's why you have to sharpen your mind to do that, just that. You need to follow the point of argument, step by step, and know when the person has drawn his or her conclusion. So he says, and I quote, the concept of feminism, both at the local and international levels, has a worm that squirms at its curve, and it's maggot ridden by its human condition, because the dilemma of the feminist is the dilemma of the proverbial chichidodo, which hates its creator with all its soul, but thrives on maggots that breed inside pieces. I'll take that again because when I saw that statement, its import was so striking um, in the way Nolan was trying to send across the message that though women fight against men, they mostly find it difficult to live without men. So I'm going to take that comparison again, and I want you to follow. You might not write everything, but just pay attention. The concept of feminism, both at the local and international levels, has a worm, W-O-R-M, worm, right? That squirms at its curve, and it's ridden by its human condition, because the dilemma of the feminist is the dilemma of the proverbial chichibudu, which hates its creator with all its soul, but thrives on maggots that breed inside pieces. When you get the essay, you can read and get that point. So Nalim somehow manages to infer that feminists fight against men but can't live without men. So if you make your feminism a fight against men, you begin on a faulty foundation. Since women need men for companionship and survival. Okay? Those some of them will now come out to say who need men anyway. We can survive on our own without men. It is an escapist statement most of the time. Because I think nature created human beings to be there for one another and not to live in isolation. So now somehow manages to infer that feminism is a fight, a confrontation between males and females, with women as the agents, which is what I call wrong feminism, which is the kind of feminism that Nolan criticizes, does not like. At a point, Nolan sees the fault and says this to show how wrongly construed such a feminism will be. It says men are the children of women, and in fighting men, feminists seem to expend inordinate energies in in a demeaning fight with their children. So it is a communal existence. You fight against one person, it's a fight against yourself. That's what Nalim is saying. That's the fault. It's seen in the way feminism is being carried on, or was being carried on by feminists at the time he was writing. It's like saying this fight has to be done with some level of reasoning and logic. Because you cannot fight against yourself in the name of fighting against men. Because women give birth to children, and so how can they at the same time fight against the people they give birth to? In the name of gender war. So you need to follow the argument again, follow the argument. Right?
Yes, sir.
So how has feminism fared in the African literary scene? How has feminism fared in the African literary scene? To answer this question, Nolan said, the contours of the feminist literary landscape in Africa in general, and Nigeria in particular, presents a panorama of undulating geography. It is a house divided against itself. It is a house divided against itself. So that takes us back to the title of the essay, A House Divided. Feminism in African Literature. So why does Nolan see feminism as a house divided against itself in Africa? Can someone answer that question? Comprehend our lesson. What does it say feminism as a house divided? Because the feminists don't seem to agree on how to go about the gender struggle. Don't seem to agree. They have different approaches. different ideologies. Excuse me. The contours of the feminist literary landscape in Africa in general, in Nigeria in particular, present a panorama of undulating topography. This is a house divided against itself, and at present looks discomforting, like the leaning tower of Pisa. So in that statement, Parliament says that there are conflicting feminist ideologies in the African literary scene because the feminists themselves don't seem to agree on the best approach to go about the fight for gender equality in Africa. The statement is that. And so he goes on to list the camps of feminism in Africa. I mean, the different ideologies, approaches of feminism in Africa. And they are, please note them, the camps of feminism in Africa according to Nolan. The feminists, you have the feminists. You have the feminists. You have the feminists. You have the womanists and accommodationists. You have the womanists and accommodationists. You have the womanists and accommodationists. Then you have the accommodationists. You have the accommodationists. Accommodationists. You have the accommodationists. Then you have the reactionaries and middle of the roaders and genandrists. You have the reactionaries and the middle of the roaders and genandrists. Reactionaries and middle of the roaders and what? Genandrists. Genandrists. One goes on to divide feminists into critics and writers. There are feminists who are critics and there are feminists who are writers, and creative writers. The critics are listed to include Chikwenye Oguniemi, the major advocate of womanism in the African context, Omolara Okundife Leslie, the Stewanists, Juliet Okonkwo, Helen Chukuma, and Rose Ocholonu, the Motherist. The critics are listed to include Chikwenye Oguniemi, Omolara Ogundipe Leslie, Juliet Okonkwo, Helen Chukuma, and Rose Ocholonu. I'll write them down. Leslie. I have really come for. Then you have an Kuma. And then you have Rose. So the feminist critics demand total equality with men. According to Nolan, the feminist critics demand total equality with men. They demand total equality with men. And they blackmail and cajole female writers to present a common front and have a rebellious attitude in their ideology. That's what the critics do, according to Nolan. The feminist critics demand total equality with men in their writing, blackmail and cajole female writers to present a common front, and to have a rebellious attitude in their ideology. The feminist critics demand total equality with men, blackmail and cajole female writers to present a common front, and to have a rebellious attitude. Then the second camp of feminism in Africa are mostly writers, female writers, like Mariam Abba, who we're going to read so long and later, so you should get a copy and read. The second camp of feminists in Africa are mostly female writers like Mariam Abba, Flora Nwapa, Uche Mecheta, Tess Women, Amata Aido, She's actually a writer critic. Nolan refers to them as gender-spaced. Nolan refers to them as gender-spaced. That means they are confused. Gender-spaced. Nolan refers to them as gender-spaced, calling the creative works feminist tracts. He calls the creative works feminist tracts. Called the creative works. The novel, the plays, as what? Feminist tracts. That means carefully written to promote feminist agenda. We call them confused, gender-spaced, and refers to the creative work as what? Feminist tracts. carefully written to promote feminist ideology. Then we now have the humanists and accommodationists. The humanists and accommodationists. The humanists and accommodationists. The humanists and accommodationists are mostly creative writers in Africa, beginning with Flora Mwakwa, Marama Ba, Ifeoma Okoye, Zainab Alkali, and Ellen Obiageli. We are talking about Flora Mwakwa, Marama Ba, Ifeoma Okoye, Zainab Alkali, and Ellen Obiageli. Nalim goes on to cite. Nalim goes on to cite Chikwenye Ogoniemi's definition of womanism as follows. Please write it down. Womanism and accommodationist feminism are lumped as one in this discourse. So womanism and accommodationist feminism, okay, as follows. Nalim goes on to cite Chikwenye Ogoniemi's womanism stroke accommodationist feminism as follows. Quote, womanism is black-centered, comma, it is accommodationists, full stop. Womanism is black-centered, it is accommodationist, full stop. It believes in the freedom of a woman, like feminism, but unlike radical feminism, it wants meaningful union between black women, between the black women and black men and black children. We will see to it that men will change from their sexist stand. This ideological position explains why women writers do not end their plots with feminist victories. I'll say that again. Womanism is black-centered. It is accommodationist, full stop. It believes in the independence of the woman, like feminism. But unlike radical feminism, it wants meaningful union between black women and black men and black children. But unlike radical feminism, it wants meaningful union between black women and black men and black children. Because in radical feminism, men are seen as the enemy and in most cases are not wanted by the women, even in marriage. Because to choose to love other women only. In African womanism, as proposed by Ogunyemi, though they seek equality and women's rights, they also want to include men in the picture, want to work with men and children because they value the communal essence of Africa, value the family, and so on and so forth. So that is what that is all about. Now we'll take it again, the last time. Humanism is black-centered, is accommodationist, believes in the freedom and independence of the woman, like feminism. But unlike radical feminism, it wants meaningful union between black women and black men and black children. So this ideology also seeks men to change from their sexist ways and ideologies and beliefs. So it is seen in the work by this writer that at the end, women do not have victories at the end of the novel, at the end of the text, drama text. Do not triumph over men. So you note that. So Nolan goes on to affirm this by stating as follows. Whereas feminist plots end with the separation of the man and woman, womanist novels are committed to the survival and unity of males and females. Whereas feminist plots end with the separation of the man and woman. That is when the novel of a feminist writer in the West ends. There's a separation between man and the woman through divorce. But in the womanist novel, the writer is committed to the survival of male and female, even the children. So the plot ends in such a way as to ensure that survival. Okay, so that is where we bring our class to a close for today. We meet again. We will continue. Have a blessed day.